Welcome to the Adventure Archives podcast, Campfire Chronicles. This is episode 3, and I am Robby Huang, and we have...
Andrew Lin.
And Bryan Lin.
And today we're going to be talking about a couple of things, but before we do any of that, we just started our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/adventure, which I saw you were about to say.
Yes, please visit it.
What you can do is you can pledge a certain amount of money, whatever you want, starting at $2, every time we release a full episode. So on our next episode, which will be Yosemite, you could pledge $2 and you'd get to watch it 2 weeks early. And there's all sorts of other bonuses you can get if you pay more money. And it's completely optional.
If you think about how little money that is, it's pretty microscopical. Like, we put out a video less than once a month, so that's less than $24. And if every one of our viewers did it, we could be putting out a lot more episodes more frequently.
Yeah, and so far the response has been awesome, and thank you so much to everybody. We don't want to waste all your time on this podcast talking about that, so let's go get right into our next topic, which is our recent trip to Yosemite.
It was pretty damn incredible.
Yeah, we just yesterday we got to look at some of the footage for pretty much the first time on like a computer screen, and it looks amazing.
Yeah, it was good. So
it's really,
what we did was
really good.
So Thomas lives in California right now. He planned a whole trip for us to go out to Yosemite, and we flew out there, met him there, and then we had a ball after that.
This is a trip he's been wanting to do since like 2009, since we went out to the Tetons in Wyoming and Yellowstone.
Yeah, didn't he go to Yosemite the following year?
Yeah, that's what really pushed him to make us want to go, because he went with his family, but he kept saying like, "Oh, I want to go with you guys" and stuff.
Yeah, when he sent pictures, I was like, wow, that place is really amazing, because when you go to Yellowstone, you see all the mountains and stuff, but you don't necessarily actually go up the mountains because they're so intense, I guess. But Yosemite, you actually get to go on top of the mountains.
Yeah, we were at the top of the cliff.
Yeah, I didn't even know we were going to be doing that until afterwards.
Yeah, me neither.
Now, was it your first time there?
Me? Yeah, it was my first time in California, actually.
Because I think me and Bryan had been there, but it was a long time ago.
We went there with our family, but that was like, a typical family trip where you drive around and you point at things and you go, ooh, ah, and you take a picture.
Wait, when was that? How old were you guys exactly?
I was a kid. I don't know what exactly, but I was young.
Yeah.
Like 5, 6?
Like 7, 8, 9? I don't know.
It was when we went to... it was like a big trip. Like, we went to California and we went out to Yosemite, so it was like a big trip.
What a hazy reality you guys must live in, where such huge events, you have no clue what year it happened.
Well, like I said, it was a big trip, so like it was like one small part of a big trip,
Yeah, we road trip all around the West, right? Like Grand Canyon.
We went to like Sacramento and Los Angeles and Nevada and the Grand Canyon. Like I distinctly remember being in a hotel in Las Vegas. It wasn't like one of those big hotels. It was one of those like budget hotels.
Yeah, just normal
yeah,
hotel.
and I remember walking outside and like feeling my skin was gonna like burn off. And then the next morning we went to the Grand Canyon and we like were there for like a couple hours and then we drove off, right?
Something like that. I remember we were watching the sunset at a ranger talk though.
Well, what was you guys' impression of California? Like, because for me, that's my first time going there. But the overwhelming sense that I had was like, wow, this is just like Florida. But I think it was just because there was palm trees.
Well, when I was a kid, I didn't think much of it. I just remember there being palm trees and thinking gas was really expensive.
Oh, no, I meant now.
No, I know, yeah. Back then it was like $198. But anyway, when I went there this time, I just remember thinking like, wow, like the thing that popped in my head are like these 80s like video game covers or something, like where you see like the sunset sky, like this perfect gradient without clouds and like these silhouetted palm trees. It looked a lot like that.
That's kind of weird because I didn't really have much opinion I didn't have much opinion about California in general. For me, it was just like, oh, it's just another place.
Well, we just come back from Yosemite, so...
Yeah.
Well, I guess for me, the big thing was that I know a lot of people from California, And it's always been in my mind. It's like, oh, what is that like, California? Because not that they're so much different, but they are different from me. And I was like curious to see, like, just from a Midwestern perspective, like, what is it about California that like we find different? But just for me, it just seemed like a coastal city, like a coastal place, just in the same way that Florida was.
I'd say that's pretty accurate. I mean,
I think we've been to Florida before, and I don't know. I remember them being similar.
I think we would have had, if we had more time to actually see the place and actually like interact with people there, we might have developed a stronger opinion about the place. Because I think California is less about the place and more about the people in that place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess that's true for most places. Actually, the biggest memory from our recent trip there is just the traffic. The traffic was so horrible.
Oh my God,
like that's
terrible.
gonna be stamped in my mind forever.
Thomas did drive me around Beverly Hills at night, and I mean, I saw like the Chinese theater and stuff, but it wasn't that exciting.
Yeah, I was too tired. That was after the trip. Do we want to talk a little bit about what the actual trip was like itself without spoiling anything?
I think-
people,
Yeah, that's
because
probably
it's
what
gonna
our
be the
viewers
next
want to hear
episode.
more about.
Yeah, I think we should all give kind of like a
Maybe like a few words that sum it up.
like your thoughts about the trip after now that it's over.
Okay, why don't we start with you, Andrew?
I guess epic comes to mind. Beautiful campsite comes to mind. And really, really strenuous, but totally worth it.
Okay, so for me, I remember in the Hocking Hills video when we went to Ash Cave, I was talking about how when you look at it, it's kind of like you can't get a good sense of like scale, and your eyes kind of like, what am I looking at, something far away or close, or how big is this actually? And it was kind of like the same feeling I had when we were there, because in the distance you see all these mountains, and then when you look straight up you see more mountains, and you're like, wait a minute, am I looking at a real thing, or is this kind of like a skybox, like in a video game?
I think I brought that up a lot when we were hiking. Like, I would always look at the cliff sides, and it was just so weird because there's so many pronounced like edges and defined shadows when you're looking at the cliff face, and you're I guess it's because we play a lot of video games, but you look at it and you're like, man, is this thing real, or like it's so weird.
Yeah, and especially in the Midwest, you have no mountains.
Yeah,
so
you
like
have
we're
nothing
just
to
used to
compare to.
flatness. Yeah, it's like
very surreal.
the closest we get is like when you sometimes the clouds will be on the horizon. You're like, oh, those clouds look like mountains. But
Yeah.
when you're out there in the West, it's like, wow, this is it. And you know, this is the Sierra Nevada mountain range, right? Yosemite is.
Yeah.
That is actually, so let's go ahead and skip right to my origin story. We were going to do this later in the episode, but I think this is relevant now, which is that, so when we first started camping, it was in 2007, the year I graduated from college, and my brother took us out to Hocking Hills. So that was kind of like my introduction to camping. But at the same time, we also started watching Bear Grylls and Survivor Man. And I remember the very first episode of Bear Grylls we watched, it was on some like bootleg stream that somebody, this was like, YouTube was barely in existence at this point. Like, I don't know what type of site we found this on. Maybe we torrented it or something. I don't know. But we watched the Sierra Nevada episode of Bear Grylls. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, I would give nothing, or I would give anything to go there. Like, it just looks so amazing. And now it's funny, like how many years later we've actually been there, and like we've experienced that same thing. Maybe not to the same degree he did, because he like parachuted into a lake. But we did get to go into the mountains, and like it's really surreal to think about that, just the progression of time. Sometimes you feel like, oh, I could never do that, but give it enough time, you could do anything.
It's funny because well, you mentioned the Hocking Hills story, and that's kind of the sense I had. Like, I feel like before that first camping trip that I took at Hocking Hills, I like didn't have a real conception of how beautiful nature could be. And at Hocking Hills, I was just like, my mind was blown at all these cliffs and rock formations, and it was just like, wow, this like actually exists in reality.
Well, it's also funny too, because just like when I was a kid, I distinctly remember having a conversation with my mom talking about how I'm not an outdoor person. And that has like completely flipped. Like, it is like the opposite. Like, if anything, I prefer the outdoors to the indoors. And a big part of it is I think that like modern technology is just so addictive, and like you just kind of get absorbed in it. And when I'm outdoors, I finally feel free of all of my stuff and obligations. I'm like, oh, thank God, you know, there's nothing that I have to be doing right now.
It's kind of ironic because like I get really addicted to the internet, and here I am loving nature.
Yeah.
But it's because of that I love nature.
It's funny because I think Andrew is like an extreme, is an example of extremes when it comes to this. Because I will literally wake up for work and he'll be sleeping until like noon, and then I'll come home and he'll be lying like in this weird position on his bed with his laptop on his belly, like redditing. And I'm like, have you moved the whole day?
It's like that's how you live a life of balance these days, which is you go really far one
Extremes,
direction, and you go really far the other direction. Because when Andrew's in the wild, there is no man who is more of a wild man than Andrew. Like he's like not wearing any shoes. He's like got dirt all over him, and he's like foraging for mushrooms and like putting face paint on, and then he comes home and he's got like puts on his like Google glasses,
which I don't actually own.
Yeah, but once VR makes mainstream, you'll have those on all the time.
Oh yeah.
I would totally give Google Glass a go.
VR is the future. We should talk about that in a later episode. But the second any VR headset comes out, I will be buying it. I do not care how much it costs. I will buy it on credit. It does not matter. Oh, and also, the second a VR camera comes out, there will be an Adventure Archives episode up the next week. Like a week from the day we get the camera, there will be an episode. Doesn't matter what's happening. This is just like I've always said that if aliens ever land, that I will drop anything I'm doing. It does not matter what I'm doing. If aliens land on this planet, I will go see them, and I will not take no for an answer. If somebody tries to stop me from seeing those aliens and having sex with those female aliens, then I will be the first to volunteer, and nobody's stopping me.
You will be our poster child for peace between aliens.
You'll be Earth's ambassador.
I will also be the first. I'll be patient 0 for the first alien-human STDs.
It's funny because one thing I'm really glad about is that our videos still inspire people to go outside. Like, because you said the VR thing, and I'm so down, but I also am like, man, Ray Bradbury would probably roll over in his grave. Not that I care what he thinks, but it's like, but no,
well,
I think it still inspire people to go out. Like,
well, the way I see it is, you can use technology 2 ways. You can use it to enhance your life, or you can use it, or it can control your life. And if people are using VR like, and they're like really like, for example, if we had an episode and they were watching it on VR, goggles or whatever, and it was like made it more immersive for them and they were enjoying it, yeah, I'd be like, go for it, man. If this is how you want to enjoy it, that's fine. But just don't like let it control your life and be like a sim in a video game all of a sudden.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing with technology is like it's very alluring. So it's really easy to fall into all those traps. Like I think that's the growing pains that we're going through with society in general. Like the smartphone like revolution has come, but it's like we're all adjusting to how much we should use them and how to like disconnect, because we can't really live without them anymore. So we have to learn how to live with them.
I've been watching Mad Men, and every single person has a cigarette in their hands, and like now we just all have smartphones in our hands.
Oh, you know what somebody said the other day? They were like, she thought that that cell phone radiation would be the same thing that tobacco was back in the day. So like everybody's like, oh, don't worry about it. Tobacco, come on, man. There's no problem with tobacco. And in the same way, people are always like, oh, cell phone radiation, come on, it's no problem.
Actually, I have to mention this because actually, a lot of the think tanks that deny climate change, without getting too much into this political issue, a lot of the think tanks that do that have the same exact like individuals working for them as the ones that denied any cancer link to cigarettes.
Really? Same people?
Yeah.
Wow, that's...
I don't see how anybody could deny cigarettes are bad for you, but let's not delve any deeper into that. But no, you're right, Rob, because I remember specifically, me and Andrew were sitting at the airport, and obviously when you're waiting for a plane, you really don't have much to do. But I just sat there and I put my phone down for a second. I looked up at everyone sitting in the plane lobby, and 9 out of 10 of the people were like just staring at a phone, or like sitting next to a plug, charging their phone and looking at it. And I was just like, man, what if a few of these people just got up and just said hello to someone and just started talking to them?
Well, I'm really glad you said that, because actually on this trip, I made a point of doing exactly that. Mm-hmm. And it was great, man. Like on the way there, I talked to this woman next to me, and it turns out she lives in the same neighborhood my brother does. I talked to her like the whole ride, learned all about her family, and then waiting for another plane, I talked to another guy who just got done on a mission trip to Papua New Guinea, and he filmed the natives and stuff, and they needed like a videographer, and he was like, man, I wish I had you at that time. And then like on the way home, like I talked to another guy who's like, he travels all over the country doing training for some type of like biomedical technology or something. But it's crazy because like I could have just played on my phone, right? I would have been bored doing the same thing I could do anytime, but like I was like, you know what, I want to like kind of enrich my life and learn something new, even if there's no like practical point to it.
Yeah. The first on our first flight to Yosemite, the guy sitting next to us just had his headphones on and was on his phone 100% of the flight. And
he was like writing a post for Facebook, and the stewardess or flight attendant, that's the word now.
He was like a blogger or something, I think.
He's some like entrepreneur or something.
But he was like he was typing up a post, and you know how they're always like, oh, you got to turn off.
He's like, oh, I can post offline. It's fine.
He's like, oh, I can post offline. And then went back to typing, and I'm like.
But at the same time, I feel like a plank calling the splinter wood.
That's close enough. But yeah, no, it's true. I mean, like, there's no reason to judge other people. Just use other people as a mirror for yourself. Be like, oh, I don't want to act like that, so I'm not going to.
Yeah. So
I mean,
the lesson to take away from this is, if you find yourself in a situation where you could put down your phone and say hello to someone, give it a shot.
I'm starting with the man in the mirror.
Or like if you're really digging your phone, man, don't feel bad. If you're like, I love this game and you're playing it, like go for it. But like if you're bored, like maybe try something else, it'd be funner. Okay, so yeah, that's all very interesting. Why don't we get into the questions that people asked us from last episode?
Sounds good. Okay, James Bolts and Never Sink Outdoors were wondering about the filming process of Adventure Archives.
Yeah, I think we barely touched on this a little bit in episode 2, where we were talking about just how much goes into making an episode. There's a lot to discuss with regards to this topic, so I think we might save it for like the next episode of Campfire Chronicles. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it needs to be an episode all on its own, because we can run through from start to finish exactly what we do. Because let's say it'll take a while, and like if we just went over it a little bit, wouldn't be that interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, well then let's go on to the next question from Alan Lyons. Andrew, why don't you read it?
Okay, he was wondering about, he wanted to know more about how I taught myself botanical knowledge, because I talked about it briefly in Red River Gorge, but I guess I'll go in more in depth. So it is true that I was like depressed about graduate school. It was the winter break, and I just signed on to the ODNR website and looked at some trees and I wanted to learn how to identify them, and it was winter, so I was like, well, best time to learn is when it's hardest to learn. And I also went on walks with my dad, and he actually knew a couple, and that helps too. And after that, I was just like, wow, I want to learn more. And I took a class called The Natural History of Ohio at Ohio State. And the first half of the class was just talking about like the geological history with the glaciers and things like that. And then the second half was like a lot of like plant identification, animal identification, bird ID, things like that. And it was really cool because we were like walking around in parks and learning about different wildflowers and trees and things like that. And since I already knew trees, I was actually already pretty good at it. I don't know, that just sort of like spurred this passion because I really wanted to know things that most people don't observe at all. I remember before I learned anything, I'd walk through a forest and everything would just look like leaves to me, you know? And then learning this, it was like learning a whole nother language in another country. Like you can suddenly read all the different signs and things like that. So from now on, whenever I'm on a walk, I'll take my phone with me, take pictures of anything that I don't know. And what I usually do is I post it on these subreddits where you can ask like what it is. But I also have a bunch of identification books that I go through. The one I use the most is my Mushroom Audubon Society guide, because a lot of times I'll see a mushroom and I'll pull that out and try to identify it. But mushrooms have kind of been my latest thing.
Well, now correct me if I'm wrong, but would you say that passion is like the number one reason why you've learned so much about it, and just like that's something you're interested in, so that you naturally just wanted to seek out that information?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think there was sort of a snowball effect, because when you learn a little bit, you're like, wow, there's like so much about the natural world that you can start noticing. Like even just learning a few trees, you're like, oh wow, I'm suddenly noticing that certain trees grow in certain areas and things like that, and you can do certain things with certain trees or eat the fruits and stuff. And so that only like fueled the fire, I think.
And then I'd also probably say that like not many people know this, so like it's probably pretty fun to be like the only person who knows all about like trees and stuff, right?
Yeah, ego plays a part too.
I will say that like in the past month or so, I've been kind of learning trees too, with Andrew as my mentor. But when you start like noticing, or when you start noticing like the differences in bark and the small nuances in the leaves, you kind of look at these things more often when you're just walking around. You just kind of find yourself glancing at them and thinking like, is that one tree that I know? And then so I guess curiosity at some point takes over, and you just kind of want to know more.
Bryan, have you found that you pick up on a lot of subtle differences that you never noticed before?
Subtle difference with regard to
like
what?
Between like different types of trees and things like that?
Well, I definitely notice, I start looking for a lot of the differences in the bark of trees, because I mean, I guess bark is something that you would never really think of.
Yeah, because
if you didn't really, care to identify trees. But when you actually look closely at them, there's a lot of different kinds of bark, and there's a lot of differences between them that you begin to notice, and you kind of like start grouping them up.
It's pretty amazing. It's almost like recognizing a word. Like I can now glance at a tree, and I know what it is, at least in Ohio. And I'll say this, that I don't think it's necessary to be able to identify stuff to appreciate nature by any means, because I mean nature's beautiful no matter what. But I think it does, in a way, make you appreciate it. Maybe not more, but in a different way.
Yeah. And, I think it's really cool that you're so interested in it, because I love when people are really basically nerds about whatever it is that they're interested in. And it's great because like I have no interest in that, and I don't want to learn anything about it. Like I'm not sparked to do it, but like just hearing somebody who's interested talk about that, it's like, it's fascinating. Like even if I'm not fascinated by it myself, I love hearing other people talk about what their passions are.
I remember I was at a car shop recently, and I had my tires changed sort of on an emergency in Chicago because I got a flat tire. So I went to this car shop, local one, and the guy was like, "Oh no, you put these tires on? That's not the one I would have done. I would have put these on." And he was like so into it, and it was really cool.
Yeah, you're like, man, it's good because like that's like how as a species we can be like more than what we are by ourselves. Like if each person's specializing, then together you can form like this Voltron of knowledge, I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, we need a society that lets people do what they want. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the goal, right? Is like you get past the Industrial Revolution, and then it's no longer like we need to be making things all the time. Now it's to the point where more or less all of our basic needs can be taken care of. Well, eventually, like that's what we're trying to get to where all our basic needs can be taken care of. Then we just do the Star Trek thing, and everybody's off journeying and becoming better people,
Yeah.
Okay, so next question is also from Alan Lyons, and Bryan, why don't you read this question?
Okay, he was asking if we could talk about what we like about tarp camping and why it's featured so often in our videos. And I guess this would be another question for Andrew to answer.
Honestly, like I think when I first got a tarp, I kept browsing all these bushcraft forums and seeing people using tarps and watching a lot of Ray Mears, and he always uses a tarp. And I was just thinking, wow, that's like, it looks lightweight. You're like sleeping on the earth and connected to it. It just seems really fun. And with regards to Adventure Archives, it's kind of something I wanted to show on film too. Because tents are cool, but tarps, I don't know, something about them really appeals to me. The simplicity of it in the versatility of it, I guess.
Well, I'd say what I love about it is the fact that you don't have to carry a tent. You carry like a 8-ounce tarp or pound tarp, and that's really freeing.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that you can just like get up and walk out if you want and look at the stars. And just another thing is comfort-wise, a lot of times I really like having just the breeze flowing through. Sometimes a tent can feel too stuffy for me.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think I've used a tent the last 2 trips, and I don't really miss it. Especially since we haven't gone where the mosquitoes have been really bad recently. So as long as the mosquitoes aren't bad, I would prefer sleeping outdoors.
I guess you're fortunate enough to be able to fall asleep on any surface too.
Yeah, that's true.
Because for me, I have nothing against tarp camping, but I've recently picked up on hammock camping. How I sleep at night is really important when I'm going camping. Because, if I'm not comfortable, then I get a terrible night's sleep and I feel like crap the next day. And recently when I used the hammock in Red River Gorge, it was super comfortable. And I mean, it was still more lightweight than the tent. And I don't know, it was just a really nice new experience. And even though it's not completely open like the tarp is, the fact that the rain fly on it is optional, first of all, and you can also kind of position it so that it's not completely enclosing like it is on a tent. It feels a lot more freeing. You can lie in the hammock and look outside and still see the view and everything.
Plus, a lot of hammocks are open too. What I'll say is when I tried your hammock, I was sold, man. I was so comfortable.
Oh man,
I don't think I've tried it yet.
Oh well, you need to try it next time you're around, because
yeah. Well, actually, I had a question about the hammock. So without spoiling too much, did it get cold last time or something? What happened with that? Is that a typical problem with hammocks or something?
I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it's more of just a well-known thing about hammocks. So when you're in a tent or, just under a tarp, your back is on the ground, and if it's not, cold like actual winter or something like that, then the ground is relatively warm because, it absorbs the heat throughout the day. So the ground keeps your back warm. But the thing with the hammock is, especially when we were on our last trip, the temperature got down to probably 50 degrees, which isn't really too bad, but it was really windy where we were. So since the only thing between my back and the outside wind is a thin layer of hammock, you lose a lot of heat from your back, so you can get really cold really easily.
Now, what temperature is your sleeping bag rated for?
My sleeping bag's rated for 15 degrees, but like I said, that's generally, when you've got
Fahrenheit,
maybe
right?
an air mattress or something underneath you,
Fahrenheit, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Heat loss through convection versus conduction.
Yes.
Yeah, that's. I was just curious if you'd had a warmer sleeping bag, if it still would have been as bad.
Well, the thing is when you're lying in the hammock in a sleeping bag, you'd think it would be enough to keep you warm, but since you're squishing all that fluff in your sleeping bag by lying on top of it, you lose a lot of the actual insulation on your back. So there's things called underquilts, which are basically little fluffy down things that you hang underneath your hammock that kind of insulates your back when you're hanging in it. And I'm thinking about getting one.
What did that one guy on our comments? He called them ground willies or something. What did he call people who sleep on the ground? Do you guys remember?
I don't remember.
It was and those ground billies or something. They're welcome too. Yeah. So yeah, the tarps are cool. Hammocks are cool. Tents are okay. They're kind of heavy, but they're cool too. They're good for keeping mosquitoes out. That's for sure.
I will say one thing that does appeal to me about a tent is having everything you need contained in a nice little shelter. I don't know. There's something cozy about it, I guess.
Oh,
yeah, definitely.
So next episode, we're going to talk about minimalism. That, I love talking about minimalism. So Dan Val asks, what outdoor activity / extreme sport would you like to do? E.g. scuba diving, snowboarding. Does anybody have a good answer for this? I've got one, but I'll never do it.
Well, one thing that I've actually done is skydiving. And I did this. There's a course at OSU that actually offered it, and I was like, I got to do this. I didn't do it alone, though. I did tandem where you're attached to someone who knows what they're doing. But I could definitely see that being addicting because it's so thrilling. It's really really gut-wrenching when you're on that plane looking outside on the ground. But then you jump out, and it's a really thrilling experience to just like be in free fall, and then like to pull that parachute out and be floating down. It's really cool.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
I asked the
I would like
instructors,
to do
and they're
that
like,
someday.
"Yeah, this never gets old."
No, I would love to do that someday. Bryan, do you have an answer for this?
Yeah. Well, I have done snowboarding, but I've only done it once. And it was pretty fun, but it's really tough to do that. But I think one thing I would really like to try is paragliding, I think is what it's called. It's kind of like a cross between skydiving and gliding, I guess. Because you got a parachute, but you don't actually, jump out of a plane or anything. You kind of like jump off a cliff. And I think the parachute is already open. Like something you get pulled off a cliff, so the parachute's already open behind you. So you're basically gliding the whole way down. But I think it'd be pretty cool because it seems like something that's actually pretty calming because you're kind of in control with the parachute, but you still have like that whole openness beneath you. And that's something I would definitely try.
So my answer is wingsuit diving, which is you wear this suit that basically makes you a flying squirrel. And then you jump off of a mountain and you can fly and navigate and stuff. Look up some videos of it because it's incredible. I would never actually do this because I've also heard stories of people getting seriously destroyed, dead, but they splatter and it just sounds really bad. But apparently you need just to be legally allowed to do it, you have to do a certain hundreds or thousands of hours of just regular cliff diving. But it looks amazing. If you could actually do it safely, it'd be probably the closest thing to flying that humans can do.
Yeah, I'd like to do regular hang gliding too at some point. I think that'd be pretty fun.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah, wingsuit diving has always appealed to me because it'd just be cool to be like Batman. A couple other things I'd be into is adventure racing. I think that sounds really cool.
What is adventure racing?
Apparently Les Stroud does it, but as far as I understand, you just have a team and you navigate through the wilderness and stuff, and you're racing against other teams to get to a certain point. I don't know much more than that, but it's like extreme hiking, basically.
Competitive hiking. That's like competitive yoga. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that.
No, I haven't. That seems to defeat the whole point of yoga.
Yeah, that's what I was laughing at. That's what a lot of critics of it say too. But whatever. I mean, if you can find a way to enjoy competitive yoga, go for it.
One thing I will say is a lot of these things sound super fun. I'll never want to climb Everest, but anyway, a lot of these things sound really fun. But at the same time, I think my relationship with the nature is one that feels more calm.
Yeah, a lot of the competitive stuff. I love competition. I think it's really fun and it's great. But I usually don't like to mix nature and competition. I usually go to nature to get away from competition.
Yeah, competition is kind of an unnatural state, actually, contrary to popular belief, I think, at least.
Why?
It does. It improves testosterone.
Why do you think that, though?
Well, I don't know. There's lots of research articles that suggest we work better as cooperative people, and that naturally we're not programmed to compete against each other, but to help each other out and to empathize with each other.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Because that's a really interesting point, though. If you think of cavemen and stuff like that, right? When you're out there, you'd think, okay, well, surviving together is obviously your best chance. But then at the same time, what if there was a situation where there's a food shortage or something and you couldn't feed everyone? Then it would become almost like a competitive state, maybe between two tribes or something like that. Because if you can't support everyone, then who do you support? Well, it's survival of the fittest is kind of a natural state, which is essentially competition.
A lot of anthropologists say that hunter-gathering societies were egalitarian, but then when we started farming agriculture and stuff, that's when competition arose. And I guess the big question is what you were saying, was it out of necessity? Were people struggling so they had to figure out how to farm and how to compete? Or did people have abundance and then they learned to farm because of that? And that's one of the great questions, I guess.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. Tyson Belko asks, have you guys played Xenogears? And I'm just going to direct this question right at Robby because me and Andrew have not played it, but I know Robby has.
Yes, I have played it. So I played it originally when it came out, probably the year it came out, which I think was 1998, and finished it, didn't understand any of the story. Fast forward to maybe 2011, I tried to play it again. Again, I didn't understand the story. But the game has great music, great visuals, and there are there's lots of sequels, kind of spiritual successors, but there's one coming out for the Wii U, which I think we're all pretty excited about, which is Xenoblade Chronicles X, which looks quite cool. Yeah. But quick side note, Xenogears has some amazing music. In fact, like a lot of the music in that game, the composer is one of the big influences for at least the music that I write for Adventure Archive.
What's his name?
Yasunori Mitsuda.
Oh, it's him. Oh, right.
Yeah, he did Chrono Trigger's music and Chrono Cross, but yeah, he makes some amazing music. That's probably like the thing I remember most about the game is that the music is incredible.
I have yet to play Xenoblade. When I first saw the trailer for that, I really wanted to play it, but I haven't gotten around to it. But everyone seems to say it's a really good game.
I started it, and I don't know how, but Brian, I think, started it too. I got like maybe like 5 hours in, and it's great, but it's such a huge game. I just didn't want to dedicate the time to it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's from what I've heard, it's definitely got a lot of content and a lot of play. You need to put a lot of time behind it.
Quick note about the guy who asked the question, Tyson Belko. He has a Medium page, which is basically like a cool little, it's kind of like a blog website, but specifically for writing short stories. His stories are really cool. I've only read one of them, but I really want to read the others. You guys should definitely check it out because this dude has like the exact same philosophy about society that we do. He sent us a message and just was like, check these out. And I was like, oh, well, these are good. But yeah, I just wanted to give him a shout out for that too. Okay, so the final question, I put this at the end on purpose because this is kind of like the big one. It was asked by Dan Val. He says, what is your favorite video game of all time? It's vacillated between a lot of different games, but every single time this one comes back, which is Ocarina of Time. And, you know, a lot of people have this answer, and I just heard somebody the other day say that this is the Citizen Kane of video games. And I don't really like Citizen Kane, so I don't think that's a fair characterization, but I know what he meant, and I agree. Like, this is the game that set the stage for all modern video games because it was like the first 3D game that really got it right. And even today, like, I could play that game right now, and everything about it, like the music, gameplay, even the graphics, and like the atmosphere are perfect. Like, it gives me that sense that I'm actually on an adventure myself and that I'm going to all these different places and like there's an actual world. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but it just has such a lived-in, real feeling. You know what I mean?
You know, it's funny because a lot of open world games today probably owe a lot to that game, but a lot of open world games feel not lived in because they're so expansive that all the non-playable characters like don't have any depth, and a lot of it feels like staged almost.
You know, that's funny you should say that because I think part of the strength of that game is that it's small enough that even though it's not even close to as big as the real world is, it's small enough that you can kind of remember everything, but it's big enough that you're like, oh wow, there's that place over there and you can go over there, but you kind of still have a sense of everything in its location. So it's like the fact that it's not so huge makes it huge, if that makes any sense.
I'm of a younger generation, so I actually never played that when it originally came out, but I played it on 3DS. But I don't know, I like a lot of games like Metroid Prime and things like that. But when I think about it, I think Twilight Princess, which is sort of like a spiritual successor to Ocarina of Time, might be my top. And it really gives me that same sense of like this expansive world that's like full and realized and stuff like that. But
you know, it's funny because Twilight Princess could be one of my answers. I think it's just Ocarina of Time came at such a perfect point in my life, and it was so revolutionary for the time. Like when that game came out, I spent 2 weeks, like it came out over Thanksgiving break, and I remember during Thanksgiving break, I slept on the couch in the living room, got up, played the game until nighttime, and then slept on the couch. So like there was literally nothing but eating in between.
Okay, well, I was actually going to say Twilight Princess too, because actually I probably, if I was in the same situation as Robby, I probably would have said Ocarina of Time, but I don't think I was able to appreciate games as much back then. So I never actually beat Ocarina of Time, back when it was, the game. So I don't think it had as big of an effect on me. And then the first Zelda game I really or I guess the first console Zelda game I got into was Wind Waker. And that was a great game, but it didn't really pull me in. But Twilight Princess, for some reason, I felt, everything that you described about Ocarina of Time, I felt like the same way about Twilight Princess.
Well, I mean, we can also just talk about our runner-ups, too. Of course we have to mention Halo 1. Halo 1 is just that. It's funny because Halo 1 is, nobody's done that game again, in my mind. A game where you can drive with 3 people in a Jeep and you're on an alien world and you're like, where am I and what's going on? And if I don't kill these aliens, the human race is going to be dead. And it's all on me. And just no other game has done that. And then there's Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. That's literally the perfect platformer. I don't care what you say. No other game has topped that yet as far as platformers go.
One thing that appeals to me a lot in video games are really, really rich and varied environments and a really, really good story. And that's why I don't like Destiny. But anyway, I was just thinking when you said Halo, Halo and Halo 3 have such perfect feelings to their environments, because it's it almost feels like an open world in the sense that it's not just a linear hallway, and everything's so colorful and rich. And Crystal Chronicles is something that we talked about a lot, and I think has been an inspiration for the show. Because that game, for all its imperfections, the feeling you get from it is so perfect. That sense of going out on an adventure in this really rich and diverse and colorful world with your friends, and camping out by the stream and stuff like that. It's just...
Oh, you know what? Have we talked about Torch Lake, Crystal Chronicles, in our original, that was kind of during the time that we started doing outdoor adventures?
I don't know. We might have to save that for next times.
I was actually going to use that as my story for...
Oh, okay. Then, next time. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, actually, again, Andrew took my game. But, when you talk about, your favorite game, there's so many... different criteria you can judge a game by. I could say Diablo 2 or, Super Smash Bros. Just based on either A, the amount of time I've played the game, or B, how much I enjoyed the game when I played it. But I think when it comes to what I find my favorite video game, I think it's something that I can experience with other people. So it generally always comes down to some sort of multiplayer game. And like Andrew said, Crystal Chronicles really captured a great feeling of being able to, of camaraderie. So when you're playing with someone, you really feel like you're bonding with them and you're on this adventure with them. So Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles definitely one of my most favorite games, simply for the sheer experience that you have when you play it with your friends.
Yeah, games are always better with other people. Even single player games, if you're all sitting on the couch playing together, that is more fun than playing by yourself.
Yeah.
In fact, Metal Gear Solid, the original one, I played that at one of my birthday parties, and we almost finished it, but we started at maybe 7 o'clock at night, and we played through until 6 in the morning. And that was just, man, that game would just wow, that's close too. But I'm one of those people who has a running top 10 list of the best video games I've ever played. So whenever somebody asks me this question, I'm ready. I'm like, okay, I got you, man. I've thought about this a lot, man. I'm sitting there pooping and I'm like, what's my favorite games? But yeah. Anything else you guys want to add about favorite video game of all time?
The game of life. I'm not talking about the board game.
I don't know. Sometimes life kind of disappoints me a lot of times.
That's
and I'm like,
true.
why is this not going my way? And I don't understand the rules of this game. Sometimes it's
why'd they make that level so hard, man?
Life is we should put a link to that in the podcast notes. Sometimes life is it's one of those dreams Or no, it's like a badly programmed game or like a malfunctioning keyboard where you press a button one time and it works. And then later on it doesn't work. And you're like, how come this was working before, but now it's not working? Like, you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I just got silence as a response.
I'm gonna
maybe it's just
throw
me,
in
dog.
one more game name as my favorite video game, and that's something we're all familiar with, Secret of Mana.
Oh yes.
Oh, great choice, yeah.
Yeah, and going back to the whole multiplayer thing, I think it stemmed from, well, first of all, the Secret of Mana's got like your very typical JRPG story of this person just suddenly becoming like a hero who needs to save the world. And that was
not to mention he's an outcast from his village.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of appealing to us back when we first played it. But also the fact that it had multiplayer, so you could play with 2 other people, coincidentally.
Yeah.
So I remember the times where we spent playing that game, hours on end, and then we would reach the end, fight the mana dragon, was it?
Mana Beast.
And then remember the hours we spent searching for those weapon orbs and things like that.
Oh man, yeah. It's funny. I got a funny story about that game, which is that games back then used to cost a lot of money. Like that game was $79 at
What,
EB
really?
Games.
Yeah.
No, that was standard for Super Nintendo games. Like
Wow,
$70 to $80.
I thought they got more expensive recently. Like I thought
Yeah,
60 was expensive.
Yeah, when you count inflation, that's like $100, man. But so we used to rent the game from Marsh, which is the local grocery store here. We'd rent it all the time, and we never got past this certain point. Finally, when we bought it and we got past that point, it was literally like, man, how do I describe this? It was like finding out that Santa wasn't real, but in a good way. It was like finding out that Santa was real. You're like, holy crap, there's like a whole nother world past this. Like there's, oh my God, there's like this level where like the seasons change and there's like this ice world.
Like when you first get Flamey and you
first
fly up and you're like, oh my God, I can actually fly to different places.
Oh my God. It was unbelievable because we never got past Gaia's Navel, which if you've played the game is not very far into the game. And like we just kept going. Like we'd start from the beginning, we'd get to Gaia's Navel and be like, whoa, where do we go next? And then when we got past it, we were just like, holy crap, dude, this is... I remember I had to do homework, and my brother, he kept playing. So I was forced to do homework, watching him play, and I was like, oh, God, I want to play so bad.
That's
That was a
probably
great game.
the very similar feeling to how I felt when we first went to Hocking Hills to tie it all together.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
funny because I never actually played Secret of Mana with you guys. I think I was like playing on the cartridge or something.
No, I'm pretty sure you probably played at some point or another when we were at our aunt's house.
Maybe on an emulator, but I don't know.
Oh.
But
It was mostly my cousin and my brother who were playing with us, I think.
but at the same time, it's
Our
still
cousin.
like I would watch it and the music is like super nostalgic to me.
Yeah.
Oh, that music is huge for Adventure Archives.
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah.
so many of our songs are just a Secret of Mana. Like it's like
if I were to associate a song with being outside, it would be the song from Secret of Mana, the very first song you hear when you leave, and it's called Into the Thick of It. And
that's such a great title too.
yeah, and that
Like,
song
it perfectly
just-
captures it.
Yeah, that I just feel like sometimes when we're hiking, I'm literally humming that song
Yeah,
in my
that's a
head.
great song.
Oh yeah, we actually used to bring a little portable speaker while we were hiking, and we'd play music like that, and it was so much fun to like hike with that music.
That song I specifically remember like the image of your sprite, like your character going through like tall grass in a forest, and like that image of a meadow is like so associated with that music, and it's like, oh man.
Insert clip of music now.
But yeah, so yeah, just when we went to Hocking Hills that first time, I guess we'll retouch on that origin story about Hocking Hills. But my brother took us out to Hocking Hills, and it was really the first time that we had experienced nature. We've talked about this before, but it's weird because you go out to one of those places like that, and if you're not somebody who's been into the outdoors very much, I think, I'm just kind of like guessing here, but I think that's kind of like a turning point. It's either you are going to become an outdoors person at that point or you're not. Like, so if you're somebody who will be affected by it, you'll be affected by it immediately with places like that.
Yeah,
Because it's just so incredible, you know?
especially like I mean, I was always into nature as a kid, and like, but it was in my backyard and at parks, and like you get some hills and like forests and stuff, but never anything like that. Like all these towering cliffs and caves and like valleys and things like that. I don't know, gorgeous, I guess, but it was just like such a different landscape. And I remember seeing all the moss and the ferns, and it looks like some sort of like rainforest, and just really amazing.
Yeah, go to Hocking Hills, man. Like, if you're anywhere in the Midwest, it's worth the drive. It's like, if you're listening to this, you might already be a backpacker and you've seen amazing stuff. But if you're like on the cusp and you're like, I've never really been outside before and I don't want to like go backpacking and like have to like bring my own food and stuff, and I just want to see amazing nature, Hocking Hills is where you should go.
Totally.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think, do you guys have any final thoughts for today?
Oh, I guess life is the best MMORPG there. No, actually, that's not necessarily true, but it can be a great MMORPG. So go out and.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about that for real briefly. But life can be the greatest MMORPG. It's just, I think you need to start acting like an MMORPG character, because in
Does that mean running
MMOs,
everywhere and jumping like crazy?
Well, sure. It's like in MMOs, you're not afraid to talk to anybody, right? You just talk to people, or like you're not afraid to tackle that really difficult boss. You just go tackle it, and if you fail, you try again, right?
Yeah.
But in real life, like, we're so afraid to even try. Like, we don't even try the things that scare us, and we're so afraid of talking to other people.
If a character yells at you, like in life, you're like, oh man, am I like a crappy person because they did that? But if you're playing an MMO, you're like, well, that character is clearly like supposed to be a bad guy or something.
Yes. It's so funny. Like, we're so ready to give up our own convictions as soon as somebody else challenges them. Like, oh yeah, you must be right. Yeah, I'm worthless and I don't deserve to say what I just said. But man, go out there and say, you know what? I am a orc from Azeroth, and I'm gonna get my way. I've never played World of Warcraft, so I might be talking out of my butt here.
Yeah, that's pretty good, I think.
But no, let's just say, okay, you know what? I am Locke from Final Fantasy VI, and I'm going to talk to that NPC and say, hey, what are you doing? Let's go have some fun together. Or, hey, what are you doing? I need a job. Or, I don't know, whatever.
Give me a quest.
Just, I think just if we can have a closing thought, a good one is, don't be afraid to go out and do the things that scare you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And also, buy the Life MMO on PC. The graphics are better.
They're in HD.
You got them 25K visuals. Those no pixel visuals. Okay, I think that does it, right? So, Andrew, why don't you put that campfire out?
All right.
And make sure you
Check us out on Patreon.
Patreon.com/adventure.
Yes.
Twitter.com/ADVARCH64.
And Facebook.
.com/adventure archives.
And youtube.com/user/adventure archives. Actually, I don't know if you need to put the user anymore. But yes, ask us questions. Ask questions in the comments. Send us emails. Send us Twitters. Send us Facebooks. Whatever. We'll find them. We'll put them in the episodes.
Yep. We'll talk about anything you want us to, unless it's like politics.
No hot button topics.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about those, but you may not like the answer.
Just don't blame us.
Okay,
Triggered.
so thanks for listening, guys. And then this is Robby out.
This is Andrew out.
And this is Bryan out.